Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
To Western Sweden. Hiya, Steve.
Hi, Tom. Partly I'm thinking that it's very hard to understand Scandinavia compared with Britain. You may have, 70 million people, let's say, in Britain, and 12 million in say, Sweden. Mm-hmm. But you've got 8 political parties in Sweden and proportional representation. And likewise in Denmark, you've got 10 political parties and proportional representation. And it's terribly regional. The way the elections work, national and local elections take place on the same day. So you get in, if there's ever going to be a change, there will be a cohort coming through that will hopefully capture both elements, the local and the national or the regional. So why the Danes will be sensitive, and I know how the Danes are all slightly different, very different from the Swedes, and very different from the Norwegians, and very different from the Finnish.
Steve.
So you can't expect them all to be the same.
Steve.
They are like a split up.
God,
if you imagined Britain chopped up into 4 sections.
Steve.
As Scotland would like, perhaps, or the Scotnats would like, you have a situation where some people, everybody has a different view of the people over there, meaning the other direction. And therefore, why I say this is so critical to the Danes' fears of erosion is they've got a very carefully constructed social balance. And when it's so easy for that to be unbalanced, that's what they don't want, I think.
Steve?
Yeah.
Can I ask you about what that's got to do with asylum seekers?
Yeah, absolutely to do with asylum seekers, because Sweden took in 1.5 million. They took in more than Germany after Angela Merkel opened the gates in Germany. And there's been a lot of pushback to this because the locals have felt swamped because they're not accustomed. I've been coming to Sweden for 30 years, and there were never, the people look like Swedes, they behaved like Swedes, all of them, in a very uniform way, because their social development from education through to adulthood is kind of calculated around a middle point, which proportional representation achieves. Remember, you've got there's 2 or 3 parties form every government, and there's 3 or 4 parties thinking they might form a different coalition and tip the others out. It's not quite like Britain. Britain has got the polarity between left and right, or red and blue, whatever you want to call it. A little bit like America, more like America, obviously. But that 2-party system produces probably more tension and antagonism, whereas the social model that I perceive in Scandinavia is more middle of the road and things need to be just right. And there isn't that much choice. There just isn't the choice that you get in Britain. You don't have quite so many established immigrant communities because Sweden didn't have foreign empire of any kind. Neither did Denmark, although Denmark and Norway both kind of became very international. So you find loads of particularly Norwegians and Denmark people turning up in Africa, for example.
Thanks.
So they come back with different ideas, but they don't really change the balance. Whereas when you find that people from a completely different culture move in, it just seems so odd. I remember being in London when the Regent's Park Mosque was built. There was enormous discontent and fear of people nearby because they weren't used to it.
Not used to it.
And that's what's happening, I think, in Scandinavia. But that identity card thing is another factor. Everybody If Britain had not chucked its own system out, which probably would have been poor technology,
yes.
Most of the computer systems that have been brought in the last 30, 40 years have been improvable, very improvable, and fail because they are difficult to make a perfect system. But without a personal identity, nobody believes who you are. So it's a very funny contrast. It's taken me years to figure out what Swedish politics was all about.
Right.
But it is. I think it all comes down to this proportional representation.
Yes.
Most of Scandinavia is. Right. Most of Europe is also rented property.
Right.
So you have that allocation of property and contracts. So you're directed more or less to where you're going to be able to live.
Quite.
So it's a very more controlling system,
sort of situation.
A soft centre
cell.
control. Sorry to talk so much.
Steve, thank you very much.